Welcome back. It's in the garden with Clinton again. So I'm Clinton from VRM Biologik, and we've just decided today that we might give you a few tips on how to grow some strawberries. As you can see, we've got a couple of nice little plants here, and then of course the expected result, some really nice fresh fruit there. What we thought we'd start with today is a little bit of the ground preparation. So we're out in the suburbs of Brisbane, beautiful sunny day. So this is middle of winter, and really is probably ideal conditions for growing strawberries. Because we're in Queensland, we're sort of a subtropical sort of region. Realistically, most of the year is going to be too hot for strawberries. So our opportunity is during the winter time up here. And in Australia, we have our major growing region for strawberries is just a little bit north on the Sunshine Coast. And then as it starts to warm up, we start to head south for the growing regions and end up in Victoria over summer. And that's just because it gets too hot, especially through the night times. What'll happen is that your fruit won't set properly and grow properly up here. So now is the perfect opportunity to get out there and get the right strawberry plants, and we'll get them in the garden. What we'd like to do here is, this bed here is a brand new bed that's sort of been set up. We've got just random sort of either dirt or potting mix and whatever else you can get to fill it. What we would do is, this would probably be a little bit ahead of time of growing your strawberries, but we would get our bucket of humus soil. We're just going to apply that to the soil before we get started. So it's literally just a case of getting it, sprinkling it into your soil bed. And you don't have to be too specific. What we're trying to foster here is that we're adding a product that's it's biologically active. So we want something that's going to encourage carbon and nitrogen fixation. It's going to do the work for you. So it's not so much about how much, it's more about having it in there. And in these sort of circumstances, don't sort of worry too much about breaking it up in other bits and pieces. Just sort of make sure you get a nice even covering over the top. It doesn't have to be specific. We're not doing like a synthetic fertiliser addition here where you're adding fertiliser right where the plant is to access it. What we're creating here is a sustainable ecosystem in your soil. So the microbiology, the biology that's going to be encouraged by this product in the soil is something that's going to grow and expand within your soil profile. So having it right next to exactly where the plant is isn't as specific. So just a case of getting involved. You might find that you want to put a bit more in. That's quite okay. Mix it around. You can use your hands. Like, I'm pretty lucky today that the soil's quite nice and friable. So yeah, using your hand isn't a problem. So get the product in there. You can also use our other product, Accelerate Bio. So this is a catalyst, so a liquid catalyst made from fermented fruits. We're going to apply that. It's literally just a little spray. And you can apply that over the soil surface as well. Just check your bottles. There's going to be rates and things that are going to be mentioned on the bottle, so if you want to be more specific, you can do that. Again, it's a catalyst to encourage microbiology and growth in your soils. There's not really a problem with, I wouldn't say go flooding it on there, but certainly like you've got a lot of flexibility in the rates that you can apply it at. Again, just incorporate it in the soil. You might want to get down a little bit deeper, get a little bit of control that way. Normally what we'd do and what we'd recommend is that we would now leave that soil for about 2 weeks. The idea behind that is that biology then has time to start acting and becoming a part of that soil profile. So, your bacteria and your fungus are going to have a chance to sort of grow through that soil. And that's going to start creating that biology, that ecological system that we want, that our plants are going to utilise. Things like phosphorus that'd be tied up in the soil is going to become more available to your plants on applying this. And it's going to have an opportunity to sort of start fixing and changing the pH and other bits and pieces that are important for our plants. For the purposes of today, we're just going to plant the plants today. That's also possible. It's not a system where the plant's not going to grow because we've done a recent application of this. It's more that in optimum circumstances, you just want to give the biology a chance to have an impact on that soil before you plant your plants and give them the best opportunity. Strawberries can be a little bit fussy, and mostly that's around, like, they're probably going to prefer it slightly in the range, you know, around about the sort of pH sort of 6, sort of 5.5 to 6 and in that range, which quite a lot of plants are going to enjoy. Mostly that's because most of your nutrients in the soil are available at those ranges. So if your pH is too high, what you're going to have is some of the nutrients at the lower end of the scale, like your iron and stuff, is not going to be available to the plant. And that's just because it changes its chemical composition in the soil, and the plant isn't actually going to be able to uptake that. So, and vice versa, if you go too far the other way, some of your nutrients aren't going to be available at the other end. And what we want to try and create is a system where the plants have optimum access to those nutrients. So encouraging soil microbes and soil biology, they're going to create that system for you. So those optimum systems are optimum for them as well. So if there is problems in your soil where you've got a little bit high pH or a little bit low pH, over time those things will start to settle out and improve. And the key to that is you know, sequestering carbon and having that biology cycling the nutrients and breaking down and then refixing those nutrients in the soil for you. And they'll start to create that ideal optimum system. So initially, yes, it's probably good to do a little pH test and stuff just to check if you've got some problems first. It's always good to sort of iron out those issues, especially if they're dramatic. Like if you've got a soil pH of 8, like you're really going to struggle sort of growing a lot of different plants. Some plants will be okay, but generally speaking, you're going to have trouble. They're going to either be stunted, or they won't grow properly, or you start to show up different symptoms on the leaves that'll show that there's nutrient deficiencies. And even though the nutrient might be there, it's just not in an available form. And when we start to do, you know, our microbiology starting to build back up in our soils, that comes down to the carbon and the stuff that we can store in the soil, and that will attach those nutrients into that humus and that complex, which will then be available to our plants. So building your microbiology is extremely important for that overall process. Just a little bit more on the bed preparation before we plant this plant. Strawberries don't like having wet feet. You might have heard that term used before, and that's a situation where the soil is probably too high in clay, or just too wet too often. So a nice friable soil like this, or a little bit sandy soil, is really ideal for strawberries. They don't generally have a huge root system. A rule of thumb for just about any sort of plant is that if you look at the size of the plant on the top, you can nearly assume there's at least as that much of that in the root zone underneath. So if your plant's only a short little plant close to the ground, it's only going to be growing in that sort of 10 centimetres to 20 centimetres of soil below it. So you want to try and manage that root zone for those plants. Now, if we were in a more heavy type soil, a way around it is to create kind of like a raised bed effect, something like this. And what that's going to do is when the roots grow in this zone here, this zone has a natural tendency to drain a little bit better with gravity, so the water will end up running away to the sides and you get a lot more oxygen and stuff in this zone, which the strawberries will appreciate. So if you are worried that your garden bed is a little bit too wet at times, or quite a high clay content and stuff, which is often sometimes hard to fix, you could plant your plant in a position up here where the root zone is going to grow into this area and be quite a lot more aerated and a lot less water hanging around your roots all the time. The water will have a tendency to still go down, and your roots will grow down and be able to access that, but most of your roots will be able to stay dry more of the time, which will help keep that plant more comfortable. That's quite common with a lot of other plants that you can grow that don't particularly like heavy soils or waterlogging and things. So you'll see in commercial situations, that's why the beds are mounded up and you've got these little furrows along the side. And quite often you'll see in flood irrigation and things, they'll actually water down these channels so that the roots will actually grow into the water, but then keep themselves quite nice and dry and aerated and stuff through the rest of the profile. In the case of this garden bed though, like this soil's really quite friable and open, and it's not going to be a problem. It's actually probably ideal for growing strawberries in. So, and it's really just a case of this one. So probably another point to consider is about the fruit on your plant. So planning ahead for what your fruit's going to look like is a key. Like if you've got, if you're growing them in a pot, or if you're growing, sometimes in hydroponic systems and stuff, some of the issues are that the plants will grow up like this, and the fruit will come out and grow out to the side. And once they start getting heavy, they start falling down. So what will happen is in a a garden bed like this, those fruit will then potentially be sitting on the soil, or they'll be sitting on the edge of your bed, or on the edge of a pot. And what happens when the fruit's touching those things, like on the soil or a hot surface, like a plastic surface and stuff, it's going to start impacting the quality of the fruit, where the fruit on that side will either start to burn or start to rot away and things like that. So it's a good idea to sort of have a thought beforehand about what that's going to look like once you're getting to the point of having the fruit. Now for these ones, what you might do is you might grow them closer to the edge so that the fruit's going to have a tendency to hang over the side. And timber is really good because it's going to absorb the temperature, but it's not going to actually have a hot surface that the fruit's going to sit on. So that won't be too bad if you had the plant growing up here and the fruit hanging over. The other thing that we might consider for in here is, instead of once it gets up a little bit, we'll actually put some mulch down or a little bit of straw and other bits and pieces to actually create a bit of a cover and a little bit of a buffer for the strawberries. And so when the fruit does hang down, it'll be sitting on that rather than sitting on the soil. And again, it's just because of the interactions with the soil and everything else. The fruit's a really tasty source of food for the microbes and everything else. So when it's touching that soil surface, it has a tendency to break down. So if you want really nice, good quality fruits, if you can keep it up off the soil or up hot surfaces, that's going to make a real big difference. Okay, so I think that kind of wraps up the bed preparation and stuff for today. As you can see, we've used our two products, which is the Humisoil and then our Accelerate Bio. So jump online or hit up the link at the bottom here and check them out online. You should be able to get those in the next coming weeks. So make sure, try and get them into your soils first, prep your bed, have everything ready before you get to your plants. And stay tuned, our next episode will look at planting and a bit more about plant health and everything else.